And me, Mr. Whalen, and Rachel from the Holocaust Museum in LA have been working for a few months now to get this to you guys, so we're really happy to have so many classes who've agreed to be here. So yeah, thank you all for your time. Today, the way it's gonna go is I'm talking to you now, then we're gonna have choir 2 and 4, vocal jazz ensemble perform one song for you guys, and then we will have our lovely, incredible Holocaust survivor, Eva Perlman. She'll be obviously one of the worst genocides of the Jewish people in history, and Eva will be telling you guys her story of survival, and with that, after you guys will have the opportunity to ask questions. So I really encourage you guys to think as she's speaking to you, and think about any questions you may have and save them for the end, because we really appreciate the audience participation. We really think that Valencia High School will really, really benefit from this sort of education that we might not always have. With that being said, I'm going to welcome 2 and 4, but please silence your cell phones and just be here appreciating this for a few hours. Yeah, so 2 and 4.
Yeah, Ella. Come on, Ella. Let's go.
This song is called Refugee. It is a song about people being displaced from their homes. Valencia's jazz choir.
Thank you for tuning for, and I think we're ready for Eva and Rachel.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for having us this morning. My name is Rachel. I'm the Education Programs Manager at Holocaust Museum LA, which is the oldest Holocaust museum in the United States and the first one founded by Holocaust survivors. Today we have the incredible honor and privilege of hearing a Holocaust survivor share her story with us firsthand. We are joined by Eva Perlman, who survived the war in hiding in France, and she's going to share her experience and her family's experience with us. And then you will have the opportunity to ask her questions. So thank you so much, Eva, for taking the time out of your morning to be here and share your story with all of the students and teachers here.
Thank you so much, everyone. I feel so humbled to be in front of you today because I want to tell you my story is just one story. There are hundreds of thousands of different stories. Every survivor has a different story. There were some that were in concentration camps and who survived by miracle. There were some that survived because they were taken in by convents or people, non-Jews who wanted to save the Jewish children. There were lots of people who escaped to Shanghai and to Argentina and to other places. So mine is only one story, and I encourage you to, if you are interested, to listen to many more survivors. There aren't that many more left because we are all in our 90s now, the actual eyewitnesses, and you become our eyewitnesses. So if you want to learn more, please read there are many books and there are many things on YouTube that you can see. Mine is only one small story. So my name is Eva. Where is Melina?
You're looking for Juliet.
Oh, so
We're good.
First of all, I want to say that we were helped during the war by non-Jews who were righteous Gentiles who helped us. In Europe, there were many people who helped the Jews, and there were also many people who betrayed them to the Nazis. So we were very fortunate and very grateful to have friends, non-Jews, who helped us during the war. My mother was born in a small village in Germany, which is now in Poland. Her father was a jeweler, and these are my grandparents on there. And his name, you see, was Adolf. It was a very common name at the time. He went to the First World War, and he even got the Iron Cross. He was wounded during the war, and he, like many Jews in Germany, felt that they had been such good citizens during the First World War. They fought for the fatherland, so nothing will happen to them, even when Hitler started working against the Jews. This is my grandparents here, and my mother on the right, Charlotte, and her younger brother by 2 years, Alfred, and my maternal grandparents. These are some trees that my mother made, trees of life, and if you can see, I mean, you can see, it's too far, but perished in Warsaw, fallen deported to Auschwitz or wherever, deported, fallen in 1915. It's, we have a whole history of people who fought and died for Germany among the Jews. So my mother's wish, when she grew up, at the age of 5, she wanted to become a physician. And her parents couldn't afford much, but they really tried their best to let her go to Berlin when she graduated from high school, where she already experienced a lot of anti-Semitism. And her teachers didn't like her because she was Jewish, even though she was one of the best students in the class. So she went to Berlin at the age of 18, and she was born in 1910, so we are talking 1928. She went to Berlin and started medical school, and she met my father. This is their engagement picture, and you see that he looks a little more Jewish, a lot more Jewish than she does. And the other picture is my uncle, Alfred, with his new bride in Germany at the time of Hitler. So my parents got married in 1931, and I was born in 1932. This is me. Just a few months before Hitler came to power. My father was a patent attorney, and he had a friend in Paris, Monsieur Placereau, one of my righteous Gentiles that I wanted to dedicate this story to, who invited my father. He wrote to him and said, if things become dangerous in Germany for you, this was already April of 1933, Hitler came to power in January. If life becomes difficult for you, just come over here and to Paris and work with us. So the top picture is the building where my father worked in Berlin, and this is, we went to Paris, and in October, November of 1933, we were all three already in Paris, in France. We were fortunate to go there. So my father already actually went to Paris in the middle of August 1933, and my mother was still a student. My other grandparents were taking care of me during the day. But in October, on October 3rd, 1933, my mother got this letter which said, you are hereby excluded from further studies at the University of Berlin because of your Marxist activities. My mother was no Marxist, she was not politically inclined at all. All she wanted to do was become a physician, but being a member of this socio-democratic student group on campus allowed her to go to the library for free, because she didn't have enough money to buy all the books. So in October of 1933, all the Jewish doctors, surgeons, lab technicians, nurses, all the people working in the university and the hospitals got their walking papers. You have 20 minutes to enter your locker and go. And the surgeons were saying, we can't abandon our patients on the operating table. And they said, let them die rather than be treated by Jews. You have 20 minutes. So you can imagine doctors with all their books and all their pictures in their offices. They didn't have bags or anything. What could they take with them? Hardly anything. So they lost all their stuff. Next. In the meantime, my uncle, I only have one uncle, and an aunt when he got married. My uncle was he was doing a stage in a big agricultural complex with lots of machinery. He wanted to learn agriculture the mechanized way so that he could go to Palestine with his bride. And this letter is addressed to his boss saying, after our last meeting in mid-October, I directed you to dismiss your apprentice, the 21-year-old Jew, in a few weeks. I have been informed that you haven't done so. It is unacceptable that today a Jew should still be employed in agriculture while our German brothers suffer from need and hunger and are unable to find employment with their own kind. You are hereby ordered to dismiss this Jew, or else I will have to take further action. Heil Hitler. So my uncle lost his position where he was learning, and he took his bride, and by 1934 they went to Palestine. There they are. This is his Palestine immigrant certificate. Of course, Palestine had a lot of British. They were governing Palestine, and many Jews tried to go to Palestine and were turned away by the British. Next. This is a mode of transportation. I don't know if you know anything about Israel and how beautiful a country it is. It's all green, lots of trees, lots of orchards, everything, but this is what it looked like. Am I in the way somewhere? There was nothing there, and the mode of transportation was an ass-drawn cart for your luggage. That's there in the middle. So they went to a kibbutz in Palestine and lived there for the rest of their lives. So we in France, we lived first in a big apartment building which was full of German Jewish refugees. And in the outskirts of Paris, and in '35, I was born in 1932. My first brother was born in 1935 for my 3rd birthday, and then my mother got pregnant again, and we moved into a villa a little bit in different kinds of suburbs. And when she got pregnant, all her friends were saying, "I'm crazy to bring another child into the world. The war was about to start. What are you doing?" And my parents said, "Well, you know, we have 2 children and we'll have to take care of them as well as possible, so we'll take care of 3. So, and while my mother was expecting my little brother, my father sent his in-laws, the jeweler and his wife, my maternal grandparents, 2 tickets to Shanghai to board the Trenton ship that was going to sail on the 9th of March 1939, just before the war, I mean a few months before the war started. Next. Oh, okay. So before my grandparents left Germany, they sent my mother a letter saying, "I'm putting 2 trunks in the mail for you on a train with old stuff that we cannot take with us. So please keep it for us if we'll ever be together again." So my mother got notice from the main rail station in Paris when she was about this months pregnant, this way, 8.5 months pregnant with an 8-pounder. Come and get those trunks out of customs. So she went, and the official was very nasty. "Oh, he heard her German accent in her French, and he said, 'You foreigners, we don't need you here. Why don't you go back where you came from?' And opened the trunks. And my mother got so furious. "Oh yeah, if your parents were fighting for their lives, wouldn't you want them to be taken in somewhere in a different country, etc. She got so mad and so red in the face that he was afraid she would have the baby right there and then. He said, okay, just go, in a worse way. So she took the trunks home. She didn't have to open them, thank goodness. And sure enough, on the top there were a lot of old clothes, and on the bottom were a lot of jewelry, silver pieces, jewelry, everything that my grandfather was able to save from his shop before leaving Germany. And he had also bought a lot of this kind of stuff from Jews who wanted to leave Germany in a hurry and who wanted the money instead of taking the pieces with them. So we still have many of these pieces in my family. So, I mean, it was miraculous that she didn't know what was in the trunks, because she would never have been able to be so genuinely angry. She would have been scared to death of opening those trunks. So, this is just to show you the kind of trip that many Jews had to take to go to Israel, or to Palestine at the time. They had to make huge detours, just any which way they could. To leave Germany, for one thing, it was difficult to get out of the country, and then to find their way to Palestine. Next. So my grandparents, what happened to them? My mother had the baby, but my grandparents, we didn't have any news from them for 6 weeks or 2 months, and my mother was very, very scared and worried. And we found out later that they were not able to leave Germany, even with those tickets to Shanghai, but they found their way somehow to Italy. And in Italy, they found a little boat, like this one here, an illegal boat to Palestine. And you see my grandmother actually at the bottom left, the woman with her hair on the forehead. That's my grandmother. This was a publication that came out in Palestine at the end of '39, I guess. And so they arrived in Palestine, and their son, my uncle, was already there and helped them to settle. So we lived near Paris in Le Vésinet, which is much closer than it looks there, in the suburbs of Paris, in a big villa. In August of 1939, my other grandparents, my paternal grandparents, left Germany, I don't know how, and came to live with us in August of '39, just before the war started. Next, this is their picture with the three of us. I am now 7. My brother Ernest on the right is 4, and the baby is just 4 or 5 months old. He doesn't look too good. We already had food restrictions. I don't know, maybe he suffered a little from malnutrition, I don't know. But he doesn't look very happy. Next, I think, this is where we were at first, and then we started going south to Issoudun, and I will show you the map before we leave this slide. Go on further, Issoudun to Lyon, where we lived as well, and then I want to show you where Grenoble is. So this is the map of France, and we will end up in this area here, southwest of Grenoble, in the mountains. It's a mountainous area, not very high, but difficult to accede. So, in 1940, Monsieur Placereau, my father's boss, said to my father, I want you to take some of the archives of the office and go south. Take your family, whoever you want to take, but take the archives of the office. And Monsieur Placereau also wanted my father to get out of Paris because the Germans were starting to invade France from the north. So my father took my brother Ernest and me to near Issoudun, the first circle, he rented an old castle, and we had lots of sirens going all the time, and bombardments. We always ran into the basement, and one day when we came out of the basement, my father found that a huge piece of bomb had come through the veranda, the glass roof of the veranda under which he had his office desk and his chair. And that piece of bomb went through the roof and through his chair. Had he stayed at his chair, he would have been killed. So thank God we went into the basement. I also, during those few months that we were there, was taken with acute appendicitis immediately to the nearby hospital in Issoudun and operated in extremis. I almost didn't make it because they didn't have antibiotics yet, and I was lucky. The doctor said to my father, she's very fortunate to have made it. So after a few months, during which time my grandfather in Paris died, my mother and her in-laws stayed with the baby in Le Vésinet for a few months more while we were in Issoudun. My grandfather died, and my mother was not even able to let her husband know that his father, my grandfather, had passed away, because all the media were controlled by the Nazis, and we had no telephone. I don't know how people communicated. Anyway, my father never knew when his father died. So in 1941, a year later, my mother tried to join us in France. And at that time, France was divided into two sides, the north part that was already totally occupied by the Nazis, and the bottom that was still the free zone. You see that Lyon is still in the free zone. Not for long, but it's still free. So we managed to go to Lyon. My father took us to Lyon, rented the upstairs of a building where the landlord and landlady were on the first floor. And then my mother tried to join us with the baby and my grandmother. And when she arrived at that blue border there between the two zones, another official was very nasty, a Frenchman, nasty, and said, you and the baby, you can go, the old woman stays behind. And my mother stomped her feet and she said, I'm not leaving her here. You oblige me to stay with her, and if anything happens to any of us, it will be on your conscience for the rest of your life. And she made such a fuss again. She was a very strong and brave woman. She made such a fuss that he finally had enough, and he said, okay, just go. So they joined us in Lyon, where we lived for another year, 41 to 42. And this is us in 1942. I am now 10. My brothers are 7 and 3. And in 42, my mother said to my father, it is very dangerous now here in Lyon, because Lyon was fully occupied by the Germans. We have to do something. We have to put the children somewhere where they might be, hopefully will be safe. So she went to that area that I showed you, southwest of Grenoble, which had a lot of homes for children. The kinds that were boarding schools in the winter and summer camps in the summer, so that French people would put their children there for 2 weeks or 4 weeks while they could go and have a vacation by themselves. So she went to all these homes. She visited about 30 homes. They were all full to capacity. Obviously, other people had had the same idea that my mother had, to put the children somewhere in safety. So, and the last one that she came to, and she was absolutely desperate by then, said, I will take your children. And this was Clairefontaine in Autran. Autran is a tiny little village, like a valley, like the San Fernando Valley, but much, much smaller, which had 1,000 inhabitants before the war. And during the war, when we were there, it had 2,000 people living there, which means half the population there was in hiding. And we were very, very lucky that nobody betrayed us, because my parents had friends who were in the same kind of village in the Pyrenees in southern France. And this was a great painter, and he was a German Jew, and he was betrayed by a villager. And the Germans came and picked him out of his bed. And he died 2 weeks later in Auschwitz. So Madame Montanex in Autran said to my mother, I will take your children. And there's her picture there. And I am next to her, and my brother Ernest is here in the front on the right. My little brother is not here on the picture. I don't know, he was probably napping or taking a bath or something. I hope that he's not there. So we lived there for about 10 or 11 months, and my mother came to visit us for the weekend 2 or 3 times. And I tried to take care of my little brother. It was difficult, he was only 3. And I was friends with the son of Madame Montanex, who was 11. I was 10 and he was 11. And we had a little romance going on. We kept the cows together. We didn't even hold hands. But we kept the cows in the meadow, and we ate carrots that we dug out of the garden because we were hungry. So the last time that my mother came to see us for the weekend with a small hand luggage, she got a message from my father before she left us, stay up there, I'm coming. My father had decided it was dangerous for him to stay in Lyon. And my parents were very wise and very smart to make the right decisions, not like many Jews who decided, no, nothing will happen to me. So my father rented the upstairs of that house in the middle, you see, which has one entrance at the bottom, and the first floor was my landlord and landlady, and the top floor he rented. And we lived there. So they took us in, of course, and we lived there for another year, from 42 to 40, actually, no, wait a minute, 43 to the end of 44. I went to a school, there was a boys' school there, a high school, and I was able to do 1 year of schooling. It took a few girls because of the circumstances. Monsieur Placereau made it possible for my father to work part-time from our hiding place this was open hiding, really. I mean, we lived there, I played outside, we didn't hear much of anything. Our parents really kept us from knowing anything that was happening. I'm sure that they were worried. But just one thing that I don't want to forget, my parents never heard what was happening in Poland, Hungary, and Germany in the Holocaust until after the end of the war. And that was good for them because they would have been terrified. They were anxious enough as is. So my father had found 3 farmers. Each was willing to take one of us in case the Germans would come from Grenoble, from the plain, into the mountains, always looking for Jews and other people that they wanted to annihilate. And we had a whole network, an information network. When the first post office down near Grenoble saw that the Germans were trying to come up our mountain road, it would call the second post office a little higher up, which would call the third one, which would call the fourth. And from each post office immediately 2 people would run, one to the bakery, one to the hotel. And from the bakery and the hotel, 2 people would run to warn these 2 people and these 2 people, etc., etc. Within 5 minutes, everybody who had to hide had time to run into the forest, because we had many trees in the forest. This is my family in 1943. Okay? These are landlord and landlady, and those 2 girls, the one at the bottom was my age, Colette, and Georgette was already 20 years old. Okay, so my mother had to start setting up shop, and she came with a weekend luggage to see us. So she decided I have to go to Lyon just for the day to pick up some stuff for my kitchen. I can't cook for 5 people with what there is here. And although it was very dangerous, she said, no, I'll be careful. So she took the bus from Autran down to Grenoble, from Grenoble to Lyon the train. It's just 50 miles or so. And from the station, and I want you to imagine that this is Lyon, the Rhône River in Lyon, and the station is here, behind those trees. And there is another bridge parallel to this one, which was for transport, for people, for cars and pedestrians, another bridge going this way for the railway. So my mother arrived at the station, she ran over the bridge, she took a tramway along the river all the way to somewhere for 20 minutes or so, where she had to get off, run up the hill, it was an avenue going up, and our house was at the top where we lived. So she ran up there, she got a few things out of the kitchen, made a bundle, and she was having tea with her landlady, who was extremely nice, extremely kind. And suddenly my mother looked at her watch and said, oh my God, I can't miss my train. She said a hasty thank you and goodbye and ran down that hill again to pick up the tram, which left every 20 minutes or so, and it was, by sheer miracle, just ready to go. My life is full of miracles. Everything is just miracles. God sent miracles. So she ran across that bridge when she arrived there with the tram. She arrived on the platform as the guy was whistling for departure. And as she was still puffing and looking out the window while the train would go, she ran that way, and the train went slowly across the river the other way. She looked out the window and she saw that the Germans, in those 3 minutes after she passed over the bridge, had cordoned off the 2 sides of the bridge and were asking for papers. And my mother's papers, Charlotte Gutmann, born in Germany, she would have been taken right away, especially with that bundle, she would have been taken for a resistor. So again, a matter of 3 minutes. So she came back. This is our valley. to see. It's beautiful, and lots of farms around, a small village. So we lived there. Lots of other details which I don't have time for, how we lived there. But we children, we knew we were being hunted. We were afraid of the Germans, but we were not otherwise in our general life otherwise afraid all the time, no. So anyway, you Americans came to Normandy on June 6, 1944, and all French people rejoiced. Thank goodness for the Americans, now they will help us to beat the Germans and finish this terrible war. And we took a picnic on Bastille Day, July 14th, to the top of a mountain, and we heard planes coming, and I hear my father saying, I hope these are American planes. And we watched them go over us, and we watched them bomb our valley down below. And obviously, we found out they are not German planes. So we ran down the hill, and my father said, if I am to die, I will die with a weapon in my hand. And he enlisted into the underground resistance forces the next day, together with two of his male companions who had helped us, two friends who had followed us from Germany to Paris, from Paris to Lyon, Lyon to Autran, and they went off. So the men left and left the women and children to fend for themselves. And then we had many false alerts. The Germans couldn't come up because the roads were too windy and too gravelly and too narrow. But thank God, they waited until the men had left to come to Autran. They arrived in Autran. And the next day, our landlord called my mother. He was at the entrance. There were two Nazis at the front door of the house. And our landlord called my mother from downstairs, Madame, can you please come and help me? I don't know what they want. I don't know German. They don't know French. And my mother went down to meet those two Nazis. I don't know how she felt, but her legs must have been jelly. She used her worst what do you call it? Pig German. When you write very bad, you speak very bad English. It's yeah, whatever. Well, anyway, she put just a few words together without making grammatical sentences, and she pronounced them the French way. So she found out that they wanted a room in the house and somewhere to eat. And the landlord said, well, they will eat at our house, at our place. They didn't have anything to fear. They were not Jews. They will eat with us, but she said to my mother, why don't you give your bedroom since your husband is away? And my mother didn't have much choice. And he said, I will give you a cot to take to the attic. You can go sleep in the attic for the duration. So we had those two Nazis sleeping next to the three Jewish children for 2 weeks. Go figure. So finally they left after 2 weeks. I met a group of Germans when I was on my way to get some milk. My mother gave me a milk jug and said, go to Miss Davis and get some milk from her cow. And I came almost facing a group of young Germans coming towards me in a little alleyway, not wider than a truck. And I was petrified at that point, and they even said in German, hello little blondie. I had long blonde curls. And I just watched the road and continued walking. I did not look at them, and fortunately they continued on their way, and I continued on mine. So 2 weeks later they left, and they thanked God again. They were in such a hurry that they didn't have time to burn the house down and kill the inhabitants, which is what they did every time they lived somewhere, to erase all trace of their passage. So they left. And then the central story of my whole thing is the bicycle story, which I can't go into now. Suffice it to say that my mother and her young friend had a bicycle accident that saved their lives. They were going down a hill to go meet my father and his friends, and my mother discovered that her brakes didn't work on her rented bicycle. And thank God the two of them fell and were slightly injured, and their journey was over. If they had continued their journey, they would have gone straight into German lines down below near Grenoble, where they had completely destroyed the whole area. And they killed everybody in those villages, from the newborn babies to the centenarians. Everybody was dead. It was a terrible carnage there, and my mother didn't know, and she would have gone there and with her friend, and they would have gone. So we returned to Lyon. Lyon became liberated in the fall of 1944, and we were able to return to our apartment in Lyon. I will pass on this, there's no time. This is my family then. Okay. I met my husband when I was 24 and he was 23. It was love at first sight, like you wouldn't believe. We thought of possible marriage in 45 minutes, and we were married in 5 weeks. An American born in Texas who came from a year in Israel and was going back to the States. Okay. And then I went with my husband to England, and where he did his graduate work in social anthropology, which then required him to do field work in a primitive tribe, and he was lucky to get a job in Uganda. So we went for 3 years to Uganda. We partly lived in the bush, and we learned their language, and I've had a very, very colorful life. And in 1962, we went back to Oxford, where he got his PhD in social anthropology, and then he got a job in Berkeley. So in 1963, we arrived in America with 3 children. I had 2 children in the bush, not in the bush, in Kampala, Uganda. And my husband taught social anthropology, first in Berkeley, and then in 1970, we went in the 60s in Berkeley, which you know was a very upheaval time. And in 1970, we went to Canada, where he continued teaching until he sadly passed away of leukemia in 1988 at the age of 55. So in 1956, I came to this area because my eldest daughter had by then settled here. She got married, and she was here in the valley, in the San Fernando Valley. So I came here in 1989 and have been in this area ever since. And I got I always asked myself, why were there so many miracles where we were saved by minutes? And I found my purpose is to talk to you people, you guys, whom I love. I love to be with you. And I was so fortunate also by miracle to find the March of the Living, which is an annual trip for Jewish 12th graders. So we go to Poland for a week. We learn about the Holocaust. We go with teachers and guides. And a week in Poland and a week in Israel. And I've gone 9 times on that trip, and I tell my story. Several survivors accompany the students and tell their stories during the trip. And I figured this is what I'm here to do now, as long as I can. Just a little thing, in Auschwitz there is this map, which I saw, which I couldn't believe the first time I saw it. These are all the railways going all the way from as far as 1,500 miles away that the Germans used with the cattle cars to bring all the Jews and other people. There were lots of other people whom the Germans were looking for to massacre as well. And these are all, and Lyon, they're all going to Auschwitz. And you see where Lyon is. There. And we were we were so close. If they had found us in Autran, we would have gone to Auschwitz in a wink. You remember the guy with whom I guarded the cows? We went, my granddaughter found him on Facebook 70 years later. And we went to see him, my daughter, my granddaughter, and I, in 2012. He was already very sick with lung cancer, and we were so fortunate to still meet him because he died several months later. And he was so touchingly affectionate with me. He remembered the story so well, and so did I. After 70 years without any contact at all. Okay. There is a big museum in Jerusalem called Yad Vashem, which has a list which lists the righteous Gentiles who really saved their lives to save Jews, who risked their lives to save Jews. And unfortunately, you have to really, really risk your life to be inscribed there. But our lives were helped or saved by people who did not risk their lives enough. But to me, they are just as righteous and as deserving of gratitude and praise. So we also went to Autran, and this is the yellow house now. It was, you see the house over there, and that is what it looks now. And we had dinner with the landlord and landlady's daughters, who are now my age. And I wanted to show you, I know time is of the essence, I think. So, and here are the two girls during the war, and now these ladies here. Yeah? I want to show you something else. We met, I grew up with a huge inferiority complex. That was my trauma of the war. Speaking French with a slight German accent, because I only spoke German until I was 5 and was never able to completely get rid of it. So people heard my slight accent that wasn't quite Parisian, and I was Jewish. So these were two strikes against me, and I felt like a second-class citizen. So I wanted to go to Israel eventually. Now, I wanted to show you these. My inferiority complex was put to rest finally. I was extremely shy all my life until now, because I met German non-Jews who, because they feel the guilt and the responsibility that of their fathers and grandfathers who were the Nazis during the war, they want to help Jews and Jewish causes, and they raise money for old age homes in Israel, and they do everything they can to sort of atone for what their fathers and grandfathers did. And they go through the telephone book and go through every street and find where Jews were taken out of their homes or their stores straight by the Nazis and taken away to their death. And they put these plaques in the sidewalk called the stumbling stones. Okay, I'll show you what, and they are small enough that you have to kneel or bend like paying homage to be able to read them. This is my granddaughter and one of those ladies who helped me. She's wonderful. She is like part of our family. Okay, what else is there? So, 80 years after I left Germany as a little kid of 18 months, I was invited back to Berlin by this lady. And she took me to show me the university where my mother was in school, in medical school, and where my father worked. And when my father left in August of '33, he told his best friend, you should leave too. And the best friend said, no, 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 nothing will happen to you. He was an attorney, and nothing will happen to me. And as I was walking with my friend and talking with her, I didn't think of looking at my feet at all. And suddenly my eye was caught by a ray of sunshine on this little stumbling stone. Next. Dr. Julius Blumenthal, my father's best friend. He was taken. You see, he was born in 1900. My father was born in 1902. He was taken to Sachsenhausen and murdered on the 3rd of December 1942. In France, in Europe, you put the day, the month, and the year in that order, not like we do it here. So he died on the 3rd of December 1942. Next. Okay, this is all right. And then they took me to see the village where my mother was born. If you remember the old one that I showed up there, it was from a postcard. This is now what it looks like. And by the way, you see that tower there with a big clock? My grandfather was a jeweler and a clockmaker. And during the First World War, he was given a 1-week furlough to go repair the clock of that tower, because people didn't all have watches yet. And they went by the clock to tell time, and by the chime every 15 minutes. And so he got 1 week off just to go and fix that clock. So these are the two ladies whom I befriended. And this lady on the left, I met in Auschwitz from a Christian group that works for Israel. And they came to walk with the Jews and to experience the March of the Living. And just wonderful, wonderful. She sends me the most loving emails I've ever received. Next. My mother died in 2001. These are my 6 grandchildren. I have 3 children, and each of my children has 2, so I have 6 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. And this one I just visited yesterday. I was there yesterday in Tennessee. And the last slide, my book. I have a book out, Eva's Uncommon Life Guided by Miracles. I have a few copies here with me if you are interested in it. And if you want to, you can get it on Amazon. And I think you can also read it on ebook. So this is what it is.
Like how did you compile all these photos and then?
Oh, well, they were photos that were in my family all my life, and I begged my mother all my teenage years, please write down those souvenirs. I want to keep them for my children, my grandchildren, and she could never make herself write more than one story, the story of the bicycle accident, which my granddaughter coaxed her to write one day when she was in the hospital for 2 weeks or 2 months with a broken hip. She was coaxed into writing at least that one story. But I heard my story all my life. And I still remember, I still remember things very, very vividly, even when I was 8 in that hospital after my appendectomy operation. But what was the exact question you asked?
No, that was perfect.
Oh, okay.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I want to say something. I have so much gratitude for my life. And I want to tell you, be grateful. If I can give you one thing to remember, be grateful for the life that you have. You are in a free country. You can go wherever you want to go. You can learn whatever you want to learn. This is so magnificent. When I think of the 1.5 million Jewish children who were murdered during the war, how many of those could have become great scientists or musicians, composers, violinists, physicists, entertainers? 1.5 million children. So be grateful for your life.
There's a question over there.
Hi. Did you ever feel like you had to grow up faster because of the things that you would hear from your parents or over here?
I need somebody to repeat it to
Did
me.
you feel like you had to grow up faster because of your...
No, on the contrary, I think I was extremely immature, and that followed me all my years through high school. When I wrote an essay, I mean, I was 16 and it was the essay of a 12-year-old. And all my teachers always wrote in my book, you know, immature, too immature, very immature. And my mother always said, well, immaturity is a good illness, you always grow out of it. But no, I was, at the age of 24, I looked like 16. So it did not make me grow up faster. I was just too stupid. Good question, though.
I'll just talk loud because I'm
Yeah,
right here.
yeah.
So your brothers were quite a bit younger than you. Do they have equally as great of a memory of these stories as you do?
We've never talked about it, funnily enough. The question was, do my brothers, who were younger than me, have any of these same memories or what? And we never talked about it. I never did with my brothers. They read my book, and they asked me to take out a few things that they were too private for them. They said, I don't want you to write this. I mean, funny things, anecdotes. But one is 87 now, the other one is 84. They are still okay and living in Paris. So, and I want to let you know, in June, I'm going with my 2 daughters and one granddaughter. We are going to France, to Paris, to see the family and friends. And then we are going to retrace our trip that we took from Le Vésinet to Issoudun, to Lyon, to Autran, and we will have lunch again with the daughters of our landlord and landlady. Yes?
Is there any significance to the butterfly in
What is the significance of the butterfly on your book?
Well, first of all, I love butterflies, but they are a symbol of transformation, of change. And my whole life, I mean, it's quite an evolving life from birth in Germany through the war and through the rest of my life, which was so colorful. And I was so fortunate to lead that kind of a life. So I write about it in my preface, why I have the butterfly. No? Well, oh.
Do you think that the world's perspective on Jewish people has changed since the Holocaust? Or have you ever been faced with hatred for being a Holocaust survivor?
I have trouble.
The world's perspective on Jewish people has changed since the Holocaust.
Oh yes, oh yes. The Jews in general were very peaceful people. They were tailors and clockmakers, and they dealt in fabrics and in metal. You know, they were very peaceful people. When the Germans came and said, we are going to relocate you, they took their sewing machines, they took their kitchen utensils, they took their books, whatever they could take. But I feel that in Israel, they have become a people of warriors, because it's a matter of life or death. They've decided that, you know, Jesus said, give the other cheek. And the Jews did that in the olden days. But they have learned that they have to defend themselves now. I think the people in Israel definitely have changed a lot. They are much more forceful. And they all want peace. but it's difficult to achieve.
Anyone else have any questions?
I have a question. You said that your parents were not aware of what was happening when you were living in that village for those many years?
I know that my father was listening to the BBC, which never talked about the Holocaust. They talked pretty much by code to the French people, and the French understood that, but they never talked about the Holocaust itself, what happened in the concentration camps. And my father had on the wall in that village, I remember, a huge map of Russia. And every day after listening to the news, as the Russians were pushing the Germans back, the Germans had invaded all of Russia. And then in 1944-45, the Russians were pushing the Germans back to Germany. And my father had a red piece of yarn with thumbtacks. And every day when the news said, well, the Russians have recaptured Odessa or Krimsky or whatever, my father would change the yard, and the yard would move more and more and more west as the Germans were being pushed back. But that's all I knew about the news.
And what was school like after the war? What was it like for children?
I went to regular high school. I finished, we moved again from Lyon. We went back eventually. We ended back in the same villa where we were in Le Vésinet. And I finished, I was very immature. So the first time I was hoping to graduate at 17, but my philosophy essay didn't make it. And I had to redouble the last year. So I graduated at 18, and then I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. And my parents sent me to Israel for a year. They exchanged daughters with a couple from Germany, from their old friends from Germany. Their daughter came to Paris for a year, and I went to live in Israel for a year, and I learned Hebrew. But after the war, I started some Jewish education. We didn't do anything Jewish during the war. We didn't speak German anymore. So.
Yeah, Dr. Getz?
Eva, thank you for being here. Your story is incredible. Would you guys give it up for Eva one time?
Thank you.
I do have a question for you. Are you seeing similarities right now in what's happening between Russia and the world and the Ukraine as to what you watched happen and unfold between Germany and the Jews back in your time when you were a young child?
I can't distinguish the syllables.
Do you see any similarities between what's happening with Russia and Ukraine and the rest of the world?
Oh yeah. I mean, even sometimes what happens here, we are starting to lose some of our freedoms. It reminds me, I don't need to even go to Ukraine for that. I'm reminded of what the Jews were, all their freedoms were taken one after the other. But oh yes, I mean, it can all start again very easily. And when I went into those concentration camps in Poland, in Majdanek, for instance, near Lublin, it is so well preserved, the whole camp, the crematoria and the gas chambers, everything could be starting right away. I mean, it is frightening. It is frightening what happens now, and the amount of anti-Semitism that is everywhere. During the war it was more limited to Europe, but now it's everywhere. And it has always been like this for hundreds of years. What can we do? The only thing is education. And that's why we are here. Learn what happened. That Jews want to live like everybody else, in peace. Raise their children, go to work, go travel, have some fun. when my son was in high school in Canada, we put him in a Immaculate Conception school because it was all in French. And I wanted my children to grow up bilingual, which they did. But the nun, he spoke about Passover. And the nun teacher said, "You are Jewish?" And he said, "Yes." "And your father is Jewish?" "Yes." "And your mother is Jewish?" "Yes." She couldn't believe that he looked like a normal human being. I don't know what is happening in this miseducation, which makes Jews look different. I mean, yes, Jews have, by the way, changed a lot. The old stereotype of the dark hair and the dark eyes and the long nose. If you go to Israel, all the kids are blonde and blue-eyed.
Does anyone else have any questions? I guess that wraps it up. I want to say thank you to Mr. Whalen and Rachel and Eva for making all of this possible.
Thank you very much. You become the eyewitnesses of the eyewitness. So tell your children, tell your grandchildren what happened. And Jews are normal people.
Yeah, and if any of you want to learn more, please check out the Holocaust Museum in Los Angeles. That's how I met Rachel, and that's how I was able to organize this. Please look into education and learn what you can. Yeah.
I also really quickly want to say a huge thank you to Melina for working so hard for so long to organize this, and thank you to all of you for coming today and spending your morning here and listening and asking so many questions. Thank you very much.